Hello and welcome to another hand review here from Teamo8. We've got one of our players here in an 18-seat turbo sit and go, Omaha high-low of course. So let's get right into it and see what happens here. Okay, the short stack limps. Oh, and our player jams. Now, our stack is generally far too big to be jamming with this hand. I can see what our player's trying to do here. He's trying to isolate against the short stack, who's desperate to get his stack in and is probably playing quite wide. Our hand up here stands to have pretty good equity against the short stack. However, he's not the only player in the hand. Now, isolation raisers can tend to have the property of isolating you against stronger hands. And if we look beside us, we've got a big stack here who can take us out, a big stack here who can take us out. If they call, they're going to be calling with an ace deuce for a low, and we're going to be in a bit of trouble. So this is overdoing the aggression a little bit. I understand that our player's trying to isolate, but really he runs the risk of isolating himself against a better hand that's going to take him out. Anyway, let's move right along. Well, here we are in the big blind a little while later in the same game. Let's see what happens here. Okay, just the one limper, obviously check and take a free flop. Okay, now this is an interesting flop. We've flopped the nut low and we've got top pair, top kicker, but there are a lot of draws that can actually be well in front of us on this board in terms of equity. And if we get any action at all, it's nearly always going to be against somebody else who also has the nut low, plus some other sort of draw. And that's why our equities are not super here on the flop. So we maybe want to bet a little, maybe half the pot, something like that, so that we can deny draws from weaker lows who might also have some sort of high hand. But we don't want to get too excited, because if we get any serious action, we're probably up against a better hand. Let's see what he does. Okay, he's come out and bet 500 into a 725 pot. That's a third of our opponent's stack. So our opponent is not going to flat here. He's going to fold or he's going to jam. If he's got ace-3, he's probably going to jam. Let's see what he does. Okay, he does jam. So right now, I'm pretty much assigning him a range where two of his cards are specifically ace-3. He's unlikely to have jammed on this board with anything less than that. So let's take a look at some equities. Just a moment, I'll bring those up. Well, as you can see here, if we assign our opponent ace-3 and any other two random cards, which is, it's almost absolutely certain that's what our opponent has, given the way he's played back at us, that we're basically coin flipping. And that's being generous, only giving him an ace-3. Let's take a look at what would happen if we assign our opponent a more likely range. First, let's look at ace-3 with an overpair. And as we can see, if our opponent has an overpair to the board with his ace-3, he's in front of us. It's quite likely, it's usually more likely that a player in this situation has a drawing hand. So let's have a look at some of those possibilities. Now, as you can see, whoop, you can't see. Now, as you can see, if our opponent just has a straight draw to go with his nut low, then he's well and truly in front of us. Now let's also see what happens if we add in a couple of clubs. And as you can see here, if our opponent does have clubs to go with his cards, he's even further in front. In fact, in that case, we never scoop the pot, so we never knock him out. On the other hand, our opponent is going to scoop the pot 1,500 times. It's not huge, about 14%, but still, our opponent's essentially free rolling against us. Well, I could show you a few more other hands, like if he only has clubs without the straights, but pretty much every combination that our opponent is going to play here is going to be well and truly in front. About the only thing I can think of where he won't be in front is where he somehow doesn't have much in the way. He doesn't have overcards and doesn't have a straight draw, although it's pretty hard to find a hand like that. Anyway, so let's go back and see what actually happens here. So now we're forced to call because well, we're not entirely forced to call, but without a special read, we can't necessarily put him on one of the bigger draws, but we don't like it. It's a crying call. Let's see what our player does. He does make the call, and, well, actually, as it turns out, our opponent had one of the very few low hands that doesn't actually have a strong straight or flush draw in it. Let's actually see what his exact hand has. So in terms of equity, it turns out that our opponent had one of the very few hands that we're significantly in front of. Most of his range, we're the ones who, at best, we're going to be coin flipping, but mostly we're going to be behind. So that's why in a case like this, I prefer not to make it easy for our opponent to get his stack in when he's got a big lead on us. Anyway, let's move right along. Okay, here we are again with another 18-seat turbo game from the same player. Let's see what happens here. Okay, a few limpers, obviously check with a weak hand like this. Okay, we've flopped not much of a weak straight draw, so try to get to the turn cheap. Our player does that. Okay, not much for us there. Just checking this one down. Okay, this is the best card in the deck for us. Let's think about what we should do. Now, we can be fairly certain that there isn't a full house out there. I mean, the only full house that's likely is someone with 2 6s in their hand. If anyone had queens full, 10s full, even 7s full of 6s or 10s or queens, they probably would have bet the turn, to try and get some value out of it. So there's every chance we have the best hand. The thing is, we need to bet an amount that can extract value from weaker hands, like someone with ace-7, whilst being able to get away from it if we get raised. Let's see what happens. Okay, that's a nice little bet, 150 on a pot of 400. Let's see if we get paid off. No, we didn't on that occasion, but that was perfect bet sizing for the situation. We made it possible for weaker hands to call, whereas a much larger bet would have only made stronger hands call us. So, yeah, nice bet sizing there. Let's move along. Okay, here we are under the gun with a fairly reasonable hand. I wouldn't mind a small raise here. Let's see what happens. Oh, and our player jams is 17 blinds. Okay, now this hand is just a little bit too weak to be jamming a stack of that size. Had our 8 been another wheel card, that wouldn't be too bad, but really we're putting a lot of chips at risk, for not much reason. So I think this is just overdoing the aggression a little. We've seen a bit from this player. He's been experimenting with amping up the aggression, but sometimes, and I think this is one of those cases where he's taking it just a little bit too far. Had the stack been a little bit smaller, a few blinds smaller, well, certainly if he was in the 10 to 11 blind range, I wouldn't have a problem with this at all. But at 17 blinds, there is a certain value in survival in these games. We're not going to get called, with 17 blinds, we're not going to get called by hands that are much weaker. So, yeah, I'd prefer a smaller raise. 2.5 times the blind would be better in this spot. Okay, let's move along. Okay, here is our player in the big blind. Let's see what happens. Okay, a bunch of limpers. We get a free flop. Well, we got 2 pair, but top and bottom pair on a flush, straight, and low draw board is a pretty weak hand. We just want to check this. And he does. That's good. Okay, things have changed a little now. We've turned a full house. I'd really like a small bet here, maybe around half the pot. Not too worried. Sure, we've only got fives full of tens. Not too worried about sevens full or tens full being in the hand because, there's certainly if they had a low draw to go with that hand, they would have bet the flop. So I like a small bet here, a bit less than half the pot, try and extract some value for some flushes maybe, or even fives full of sevens in the unlikely event that's out. But let's see what our player does. Okay, or someone's bet into us, half the pot, we should call here. Oh, and he folds. That's I don't see any reason to fold yet. I don't think anyone has indicated that they have, unless he has some amazing special read on this player here. And that size bet, a raise there from the short stack isn't going to be a problem for us. So yeah, I think that's a little bit weak folding there. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, it's a little while later. Our player's built up a stack a little. Let's see what he does here. And he's jammed his 10 blinds against a limp. Really, I think our stack is a little bit too big to be making this move. We've got a lot of people left to act behind us. We've got a guy who's limped in from early positions, so there's not much chance that he has a weaker hand than us. He certainly is unlikely to have much of a weaker low. Yeah, I mean, our hand range guide says that we should fold here. If that pair of fours in our hand had been a pair of jacks or better, then I wouldn't mind. But really, this is getting just a bit too aggressive. And we're putting a lot at risk. We're not under a lot of pressure yet. 10 blinds is a perfectly, well, we're even close to 11 blinds. Perfectly good stack for this at this point in the game. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, here we are with a high-only pair of kings. This is a folding hand. The reason we're seeing this one is because, that's what in poker theory, technical terms, is known as a brain fart. I mean, really, jamming a high-only hand, sure, we're down to 7 blinds, but still, this is unnecessary. Generally in these sit and goes, you don't want to be starting to jam high-only hands until you're really getting desperate, down to 5 or 4 blinds. Really, this stack is too big to jam a hand that weak. We're not going to get called by much worse. Okay, a little bit later, we're in the small blind. Let's see what happens here. Folds around to us, and we go for the steal. Okay, now our hand is a little bit weaker than we'd normally want to have when jamming a stack this size. The primary problem here isn't our kings, it's our 7. It's we really want to be stealing here against a bigger stack. We really need our kings to have 2 wheel kickers. Otherwise, we're just far too weak on the low. Had we been jamming against a stack half our size, then I'd be less concerned because at least we'd still be in the game if somehow they managed to scoop us. But, this is starting to overdo the aggression just a little bit too much. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, a little while later, we've got, about 7.5 blinds. This hand should be a fold. Our player's jammed it. Not really sure what he's thinking here. I guess he's trying this new amped up aggression style, but this hand from this position with this many players left to act, I can see why he's doing it in a sense that we're at the final table, we're 2 places off the money, but still I don't think it's necessary to pick such a weak hand. It's got such a poor low. The high is reasonable-ish, but such a poor low. Yeah, it's our hand range guide says that's a fold. I say it's a fold. Dude, fold the hand. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, so now we're on the bubble. We've got a fairly weak hand here, but circumstances have changed from that last one. We're coming last. We're on the bubble. We're about to post a big chunk of our stack in the big blind on the next hand. So even though we have a weak low and a moderate high, This is a situation where we should jam. So let's see what our player does. And he does jam. That's a good jam. Good raise all in. Okay, good move. Let's move on. Right, we're now 2 hands later. We're still on the bubble. Circumstances haven't changed that much, although we now have the advantage over the guy in the big blind if someone goes to seal his big blind. Let's see what happens here. Okay, it folds to us. Now, this is where I do advocate a jam. We've got, not only do we have a couple of wheel cards, but we've got a pair as well, and we've got a suited hand. So this is plenty strong enough to steal here. What does our player do? And he does go for it. Yes, that's the correct play. At this point, I mean, the blinds and antes are eating your stack up so rapidly, you can't sit around and wait forever. This is plenty good enough to jam, and our opponent's calling range is going to be fairly desperate. So our equity is going to stack up nicely, especially when you add in the fold equity. Our total equity has got to be well over 50% here. This is a good move on the bubble. And it's the very next hand. The steal worked. And now, again, we've got a couple of wheel cards. However, we've now got a bit of an edge. We're in front of this guy in the small blind, and we're effectively in front of both of these two players behind us because they hit the blinds first. So we're essentially in second place. So although normally with 2 wheel cards on the bubble and not being in a solid lead, I'd normally advocate a jam. In this situation, with 3 players under more pressure than us, we should ease up a little bit and just let this one go. And our player does. That's good thinking, good strategic thinking on the bubble. Okay, here we are a little while later. Our player's managed to do quite nicely. He's chipped up. He got the chip lead? The bubble has burst, of course. We're in the money. Let's see what happens in this hand. Okay, we have a limp. I'm not a big fan of limping when the stacks are this shallow. Anyway, we check, yep, and take a free flop. Okay, we've caught a little piece of that, but we don't want to get too excited just yet. Our opponent checks behind. Okay, 2 pairs sort of. Okay, I don't mind a check here at all. Opponent checks behind. Okay, we've boated up. Now our opponent hasn't shown a lot of interest here. Perhaps he was drawing to a low. He's limped in, so he probably had some sort of low. That's gone. We want to try and extract value. I mean, clearly it's exceptionally unlikely he's got pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket fours, pocket eights. Well, that's impossible, obviously. Yes, if he had any better hands here, like even queen 8, jack 8, he might have shown some interest on the flop or the turn. So what we want to do is we're pretty confident we're ahead, so we want to bet an amount that a weak hand could call. Maybe if we're lucky, he's got ace 8 and he'll pay off with that. Or who knows, maybe he's got kings or aces and thinks his 2 pair might be good. So we need a small bet here to try and extract value. Yes, that's a perfect size bet. What does our opponent do? He calls, and we managed to extract value out of the hand. Very, very nice. I'll just show you that we did actually win this one. Very, very nice. And so we got him to call on a 2-pair hand. Any more than that, our opponent probably would have folded. That's really nice bet sizing, clever thinking. And a few hands later again, we've got the chip lead. The other stacks are all pretty short. We've pulled up a monster for 4-handed under the gun, so what I reckon our player should do here, he should jam this and keep the pressure on. Oh, but he folds. Not sure why he did that. He really should. When you got the chip lead and you've got reasonable equity in your hand, ram it home. Ram it home. Play for the win. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, we're doing nicely. Our players chipped up a bit. There's only 3 players left. Similar situation to before. He really should jam his hand. The guy in the big blind, with his stack size and the fact that he's coming last, means that he pretty much has to call with any 4 cards. So we're going to be playing. We have a lot of equity against 4 random cards. The guy down here in the small blind, he's not going, if we jam, he doesn't want to bust before the guy in the big blind. So he's not going to call unless he's exceptionally strong. So a call from him is unlikely. Even so, we've got a much bigger stack. We still have reasonable equity. It's unlikely he'll scoop us. So we should jam here. Let's see what our player does. Oh, and he folds. That's a mistake. Let me show you the equities to show you what I mean. Now, as you can see here, as I said, the big blind has to call with any 4 cards. We're ahead of that range. There's a slight possibility he'll fold, so that fold equity puts us up. And the small blind, you know, he may tighten up a bit here, but really we're not at risk of being knocked out. So that really should have been a jam. Anyway, let's move along. And here we are on the very next hand in the big blind. Let's see what happens. Okay, the button jams for 1.3 big blinds. Now that the small blind is folded, so even though we have a terrible hand, we have more than the tiny little bit of equity we need for this to be a positive call. And he does make the call. Correct play. Well done. Okay, that's the last hand from this game. Our player did go on to win this one. Nicely done. But just my main thoughts here, we're just amping up the aggression just a little bit too much. Savvy opponents are going to pick up on it, and they're going to start punishing you for getting a little bit out of line. But anyway, if you'd like to know more about what we do with staking, training players in Omaha, high-low, that sort of thing, then check out our website at teamo8.com. Bye for now.